In this video, our objective is to apply the design process we laid out in the previous videos to a real-world example. So let's get started. First, let's review the 5-step design process. Step 1, survey the property and conceptualize the path of the nozzle circuit. Step 2, identify specific locations or surfaces available for nozzle installation and consider transitions from one surface to another. Step 3, decide where to place the misting control unit. Step 4, make a scaled drawing of the installation plan. And finally, Step 5, use the pressure engineering rules developed in the fundamentals videos to anticipate pressure issues in your design and engineer around them. As we went through the process, we introduced 11 design guidelines to keep in mind as you work through your design. Since they're available in hard copy online, and in the interest of shortening this video, we won't review those now, but we will touch on each of them as we work through our example. With that in mind, let's get started. This is our example house. It's a 2-story Tudor-style home that sits on a corner lot. In order to facilitate communication about the layout, we are going to rely on this schematic of the property throughout the video. Normally, you would develop this as part of Step 4 of the design process, but we need it now to help us clearly present the example. Note the compass at the upper left of the screen. Lengthwise, the lot is oriented north-south. This is the house. The front of the house, which is at the bottom of our diagram, is on the south end of the lot. As we present split-screen photos and videos, we'll add this graphic of an eye to the schematic to indicate where in the property we are and the direction the camera is pointing. Here, the eye indicates that we're standing in the front yard looking at the front of the house. The backyard, as you can see from the rounded outline of the pool, is to the north. There is a garage and an apartment above at the north end of the lot across the pool from the house. We have already had a discussion with the homeowners. They spend a lot of time in the backyard and around the pool, so that's the area they are primarily interested in protecting. The sidewalks that border the house to the south and east get quite a bit of foot traffic, and they want to minimize the risk of the system misting while someone is passing by. So we will keep that in mind as we design the nozzle circuit. Let's get started with step number 1, where we'll survey the property and conceptualize the nozzle circuit path. As we step north from the sidewalk into the front yard and look straight ahead, we note the wrought iron fence that surrounds it and the lush landscaping in the front yard. The iron fence is noted on the schematic with this thick black line. The front yard is encircled with landscape beds, and they are represented by the green areas on the schematic. Here we are standing on the southeast corner of the property and panning the camera counterclockwise from the north to the west. Now we're looking into a side yard on the west side of the property and see a gate that separates the side yard from the front. There is quite a bit of lush landscaping here on the west side of the front yard and into the side yard, places where mosquitoes harbor, and we probably need to make sure it gets covered by the installation. As we step into the side yard, we note some thick, tropical-looking vegetation to the left. The iron fence extends down the west side of the property. We also see a number of air conditioning units by the house. We may want to consider this area to site the unit. We'll represent that on the schematic with the red X. As we pass through the fenced entryway, we see that the wood privacy fence on the west side of the property extends all the way to the back. On our schematic, we'll indicate the wooden fence with a red line. That is an ideal surface for installing nozzles, and according to the design guidelines, we'll need to be mindful to locate them below the very top of the fence. Just inside the fence entry, looking right or east, we see some monkey grass where we could probably install a couple of riser nozzles, and a wooden deck that offers another surface for nozzles. We'll represent the eave of the deck with a blue line. Here, we are standing at the southwest corner of the backyard and panning the camera clockwise from the north, along the fence line, to the northeast corner of the backyard. We see that a lot of the backyard is covered with flagstone pool deck. There's a wooden fence gate that connects the west side privacy fence to an eave line, again noted in blue, at about 8 feet running west to east along the south face of the garage where we can install nozzles. Remaining on the west side of the backyard, we walk north and open the gate at the north end. We see a shaded, small side yard on the west side of the garage that contains an air conditioning unit and the pool pump. This is definitely a candidate location for the misting unit. We should probably put a few nozzles in here as well. We're standing now on the north side of the pool, facing south and panning left to the west. We see the brick wall of the back of the house, which faces north. It is 2 stories here. The eave is way too tall to install nozzles, and we can't put nozzles at ground level because it's all flagstone. So the run that we plan on the eave of the deck will have to terminate at the house. It might be a good idea to also install a couple of nozzles underneath the deck, as that is a likely harborage area. Now let's move over to the east side of the backyard. Here we are standing at the southeast corner of the pool, looking north. Note the 8-foot privacy fence that runs from the garage south. There is a landscaping bed on the inside of the fence. We should be able to easily extend the nozzle run from the eave on the south side of the garage apartment to the fence and along it. There are some azaleas in the landscaping bed which can be vulnerable to plant burn. We'll need to be mindful to keep the nozzles a few feet from them to keep that from happening. Turning 180 degrees and looking south, we can see a relatively narrow side yard on the east side of the house. With these bushes and ground cover, this offers more mosquito harborage areas than any other part of the property, and we'll make sure to cover the area thoroughly. The fence on the east side of the property runs to the south and is an ideal installation surface, and we should be able to locate some risers in the landscaping for further coverage. So that finishes our tour. Let's summarize what we've seen and conceptualize the nozzle circuit. Here is the complete schematic with potential nozzle installation surfaces noted. We know we want to concentrate on the backyard and avoid the front. So let's establish the base leg of our perimeter by running nozzles along the eave on the south side of the garage. We'll extend our perimeter from the eave to the privacy fence on the east side of the property, stopping at the fence that separates the front and backyard. And because the landscaping is so thick and lush, we'll add a bank of risers inside this courtyard. Then we'll extend our perimeter from the garage eave along the privacy fence on the west side of the lot. And to complete our perimeter, we'll install a run of nozzles along the deck eaves. We'll also install a few risers in the monkey grass adjacent to the deck and install a nozzle underneath the deck. And because it's easy and available, we'll add a few nozzles on the fence of the alcove on the northwest corner. And because the landscaping is pretty thick, we'll extend the run on the west privacy fence to the iron fence. And finally, we'll add a few risers to the lush landscape near the gate that separates the back and front yard. Okay, now we've got a concept for our nozzle path. Before we move on to the next step, let's go through a checklist for step 1 to make sure we haven't missed anything. Does our nozzle circuit trace a perimeter of protection? With the exception of this area here, where it's just not desirable to install nozzles, the circuit traces almost a complete loop around the backyard. Have we taken wind drift into account? Because the whole area is bounded by the privacy fence, the house, and the garage, it is pretty sheltered from the wind. We'll just need to keep the nozzles off of the very top of the fence. Do we need interior nozzles? No, the perimeter isn't large enough to require them. Are there areas that might require extra treatment? This area here on the east side of the house is pretty lush and shaded. We should increase the nozzle density there. And are there any bodies of water, koi ponds, or jungle gyms or other areas where we need to be especially careful? Luckily, not in this property. Okay, that's it for step 1 and for this video. We've got a solid conception of the nozzle path and have thought through potential complications. In the next video, we'll start with step 2 and identify nozzle locations and transitions.